we are going to be looking at the Linné du Café, specifically our dry distillation and aromatic taints. So that's on a card here. And we also have it in the Linné du Café. Oh, but I've already pulled it out. So we will be looking at that. We may have some other people to join this call soon, but I am recording this for the benefit of all so that we can come back and refer to this in future lessons. I have laid out for us the art of aroma perception. So we have 9 aromatic taints. First, the earthy. We have earth, leather, and straw. Then the fermented, coffee pulp, basmati rice, medicinal. We move to phenolic, rubber, cooked beef, and smoke. So these are all part of our art of aroma perception in coffee and the aromatic taints. Now for the next dry distillation, we will look at 3 categories: spicy, resinous, and pyrolytic. Spicy includes pepper, clove-like, and coriander seed. Resinous includes maple syrup, black currant, cedar, and then pyrolytic includes malt, roasted coffee, and pipe tobacco. So these are 4 of the coffees we have. These are 2 of the 4 from the Art of Aroma Perception in Coffee posters. And the way those are broken up is we have 9 aroma vials for each of the 4. So 9 times 4 is 36. And though they're not in order, so it doesn't go enzymatic, sugar browning, dry distillation, taints, they are intermixed within the 36, but there are 9 for each poster. So 4 posters for the 36 Linné du Café. Now I know it might be hard for you to watch a video of someone else smelling or tasting and describing that to you. You want to experience it. You want to have this experience for yourself firsthand. Well, the best way to do that would then be to buy yourself the starter kit, the introduction to Linné du Café, which includes 6 of the 36. It's very affordable. Everyone can get a hold of one of these. They are for sale at rock.coffee and only $40. So if you want to taste, don't taste. If you want to smell 6 of these most common aromas as found in coffee, you can do that with the starter kit. Now, if you get a hold of the full kit, you can also purchase that at rock.coffee, and just go to the lab and that will be sent directly to you. So then all of the videos you watch, the flavor wheels that you look at, reference, art of aroma perception in coffee, all of these things will start to make sense as you're looking at these complex flavor wheels and trying to understand aromatic taints, trying to understand enzymatic, sugar browning, dry distillation. It's important that you are able to connect a olfactory memory with that knowledge, okay? So this is the knowledge. This is something you come back to. This is something you recalibrate to. If you are looking to move into sensory intermediate, sensory professional, green coffee and roasting intermediate and professional, or a Q grader, Arabica, Q Robusta course, you will need to master these. The Linné du Café is part of Jean Lenoir's kits. There are also wine kits and whiskey kits. This is a worldwide industry standard. So, all of that to say, let's dive in. Now, this is not to repeat what I've already put on YouTube. I have 4 really helpful, exhaustive videos on YouTube. This will be more of a summary because we're hitting 2 of them in less than an hour, whereas the others on YouTube, each video covers only 9 and goes in depth for the 9. So, first one, the art of aroma perception in coffee, aromatic taints. Now, I want to talk about aromatic taints first. And as you look at the old SCA flavor wheel, this one is bilingual, forgive me, but if you speak Chinese, awesome. So the aromatic taints, we're actually going to find those over here and within our coffee flavor wheel. So aromatic taints are something that we have earthy, fermented, and phenolic. So these can come from, and often do come from, the farm, the soil, the processing, the storage, or within storage, kind of that aging, maybe transportation. Okay, so all of these are kind of influenced onto the bean, or they come from the soil and from the actual production. So the reason that I want to emphasize that is that it's different from dry distillation. A lot of dry distillation might come from the roasting process, especially. Now, coffee is complex, it travels the world, it's grown in very many different environs and terroirs, and it's roasted and stored differently. So we can't make specific statements about it, but we can make general, most often this is the case, statements. So our aromatic taints will come from the ground, from the storage, from the processing, from some kind of deterioration of the bean. And if you look at this old flavor wheel, we actually have one over here that includes the external changes, the internal changes to the bean, aromatic taints, and taste faults. Okay, so on that aromatic taints, I'm just going to look here real quick. We don't have the specific names of earth or coffee pulp or rubber or cooked beef, but they do come from, it shows us improper roasting, from fat absorbing taste, and then we'll also have others. So without further explanation on this, this is a seldom used, the taints chart is seldom used today because it was part of the old SCAA flavor wheel, and then we just moved to an updated version and a whole lot of other cool versions. But it's important for us to go through these, so let's look at them real quick. Earthy. Okay, so classic teaching in coffee, natural processed coffees, earthy was a descriptor. And a lot of the European community, SCAE, actually said, like, this is a really bad thing. They just would count it down and speak poorly of this characteristic. However, some coffees may display an earthy aspect or quality to them in a quality sense. This smells like fresh earth, like when it rains outside. And this can happen when coffee is dried on the ground. It can absorb some of those flavors, so again, from processing. The next one, under earthy, so earthy is a category of 3, is leather. Now this is in the family of animal, and it smells just like that. If you go to a leather shop, shoes or belts or bags that are made from leather, you will smell this classic leather smell. Now in some of our bold coffees and some of our blending, we actually want these aspects of leather to kind of give it some of that bold vibrancy. Okay, this will fall into that bold category of coffee. So a lot of these aromatic taints can also be very much part of a bolder, robust kind of a coffee description, and some people really seek that, or it's sought after in blends. Now, if you stray too far, if it becomes too earthy, too leather animalic, too much like straw, then of course you don't want any of those to dominate the cup. Straw, very much dry, vegetal. It smells like kind of that harvest in the fall, or drying in the sun. And so if you've lived on a farm, or if you spend time on a farm, you're going to have this memory. maybe it reminds you of the horses in the yard. Fermented. So we looked at earthy. We have earth, leather, and straw. Fermented, you're moving into coffee pulp, basmati rice, and medicinal. Now this is going to be fermented, winey, toasty, and chemical. Okay, so coffee pulp, some people have a wonderful experience with coffee pulp. And winey is a characteristic we see on a lot of dried, even anaerobic, processed coffees. But there is that element of fermented. So we can move into a safe zone of fermented and winey, and we can move into an offensive or overpowering zone. I would say all of that is true for these aromatic taints, where there might be a small hint of them or aspect to them. A lot of our dry processed, natural processed coffees, I would like coffee pulp to show up more often. It has that winey fermented fruit aspect to it. So often we'll use the words like dried fruits or dried something, but really we're leaning into that winey coffee pulp fermented. It has this sweetness to it, which in small quantities is highly desirable. So toasty basmati rice cereals, again, a small amount of toast, a small amount of cereal in a coffee can kind of balance it out and make it smooth. But if this dominates the cup, then, you're moving into like undeveloped green coffees, underripe green coffees, Quaker green coffees. You don't want a cup that's dominated by this toasty basmati rice. But a little bit of it does blend in nicely. Medicinal, it's hard to say you want much of this. It is kind of this sweet chemical, almost like a sweet alcohol. A cleaning product you might be reminded of a cleaning product with medicinal, but this will show up in some coffees that are of lower grade. It'll show up in some darker roasting methods. And what you would want to make sure is that this isn't coming through because the beans were just thrown into a burlap bag without a grain pro. Maybe they picked up some petroleum or other fumes along the way in transportation. Just make sure if there is a little bit of a medicinal aspect that it's very minor. Okay, so we did earthy fermented, now phenolic. Phenolic includes rubber, cooked beef, and smoke. So where do we get this from? Rubber, cooked beef, and smoke. These are going to be aspects of transportation and storage, maybe of the soil, but also of roasting. You can get some of that in the darker roast. Rubber is highly offensive to me. But in some of my darker roasts and some of my Robusta coffees, I will have an aspect of this. If it's blended and characterized not as if it's not the dominant character of a coffee, then maybe that's acceptable, that rubber in this phenolic. Phenol is not something that we seek for. It's something that, has transformed kind of those internal or external environments to the bean. So protecting against them is important. Cooked beef has this same chemical kind of aroma to it, but it's toasty and animal. So it's not like that fresh leather kind of cigar smoke, tobacco, whiskey lounge kind of a quality. But cooked beef comes from poor roasting, a poor absorption and change in fats in the coffee seed. And it has that toasty animal kind of a cooked beef, boiled beef. It's not to be desired. It may show up in small quantities. Smoke is not a bad thing. A lot of people like some smoke in their coffee. Again, if you're just dominated by smoke, if that's only characterizing your coffee, then you're not going to want just smoke, right? It's going to be very carbony. But a good dark roast will have an element of smoke to it, and it has a nice balancing. The smoke here reminds me very much of like some of the black beers that have dark roasted grains and barleys and malts, kind of that Guinness or porter. So probably smoke is added to a lot of those as even an additive or an ingredient. So art of aroma perception, aromatic taints, we're going to classify those under influences onto the beans in processing or transportation or storage, or something that kind of came up during that growing process from the farm. So it's really hard to change any of those as a roaster. We basically want to avoid buying coffees that are dominated by those, but there may be elements of those that are in the coffee or that come out in different roasting styles, which leads us into dry distillation. So dry distillation, we have 3 families under this. This is very much that third stage in our roasting. So as we roast through that first enzymatic chapter where we're very flowery and floral and fruity vegetal, we're going to move into sugar browning where it's nutty and caramely and chocolatey, and then we're going to continue kind of transforming those proteins and acids and carbonizing the bean, burning the sugars into dry distillation. So that's when we get resinous, spicy, and carbony. Sometimes it's hard to read backward. So that carbon, that elicits this idea of burning and char and dark roasting. Spicy, spices like baking spices, like cooking spices, spices as found in seeds, and those too are very resinous. So resin, think of like tree sap or something that the seed and the plant uses for its own energy, kind of the liquid and syrup of a tree or a plant. And resinous is one of our categories there. Okay, so within this, I love this because the more language you add to your potential flavors that are going to be found in your coffee or your roasting, the more quickly and easily they come to mind. So resinous can be described as terpene or medicinal. Okay, piney, blackcurrant, camphoric, cineolic. Spicy can be warming or pungent. Warming like cedar and pepper. Pungent like clove and thyme. Okay, cooking spices. Carbony like smoky or ashy. Tarry, pipe tobacco, burnt and charred. So we have this progression of just that burning pyrrolization. That's the later stage of dark roasting. And it's important in the roasting process. Okay, so spicy. First, we have pepper, clove-like, and coriander seed. So again, spicy is not just like the impression of heat and fire and spice like you get from a jalapeno pepper, but the black pepper and the white pepper, kind of that peppercorn or clove or coriander seed. So pepper is very much a black pepper, like a fresh ground black pepper. You've got to get some pepper kernels or peppercorns and grind them fresh. It has this resinous is a great descriptor. It has almost like this piney, like pine needles. You break some pine needles, pine cones, tree sap, which is slightly sweet and very spicy, strong, and terpenic. So turpentine, terpenic. These are chemicals naturally occurring in nature, and we find them used in many different situations. Clove-like, I just love clove. Sweet, spicy sweet. So often this is associated with Christmas and holiday and winter cooking and baking. You put it with apples, you put it with cinnamon, you put it with dark sugar and baked spices, clove-like. It has this spicy sweet characteristic to it. But again, not far from that, kind of that pine resin, coriander seed. Definitely more floral and fruity, but still spicy. Coriander seed is the seed of cilantro. So you'll hear cilantro and coriander used interchangeably, whether it's British English or American English. And the seed, coriander seed, has a little bit more of that spicy aspect to it. Less vegetal, also floral. So spicy. Then we move to resinous. So resin, that same kind of idea of a tree sap resin is part of this family. We have maple syrup coming from the maple tree, black currant-like, very much resinous, and cedar. Cedar is a type of a pine tree. Okay, so maple syrup. Maple syrup may also be licorice, depending on your kit or where you are in the world with this kit translation. Maple syrup has that sweet, spicy, woody smell. So don't confuse maple syrup with just the super sugary version. This is the aroma of maple syrup. Okay, so that's where we have to divide. Like we have our sweet taste over here that we associate with things like maple syrup or vanilla, like vanilla ice cream. But the actual aroma of maple and the aroma of vanilla are to be isolated from that strong sugar impression that our taste buds will often blend with the taste and the aroma together. Black currant just really has this fruity, sulfury smell. Fruity and sulfur, fruity and resin coming together, very much like that blackberry, like a raspberry type of a vine. This vine that is strong, grows in hard places. It's thorny, but it bears this fruit that is sweet and sour and pungent, right? So you have kind of that mixture of resin and fruit, fruity, sulfury. Cedar is just very woody. If you spent time in a wood shop, fresh wood chips out on the playground, cutting wood, you will get this woody cedar resin. Okay, wood and resin, fresh tree cutting, pine, all of that resin is part of that. And the last one is pyrolytic. So pyrolytic, we have malt, roasted coffee, and pipe tobacco. Pyrolytic is part of that pyrolysis, which is later stages in roasting, the breaking down of chemicals. When those chemicals when the coffee is releasing CO2, it's a different chemical process than during first crack when coffee is releasing water moisture. So this pyrolytic often happens in these later stages of roasting, and it's characterized by malt, roasted coffee, and pipe tobacco. Malt is toasty and cellulosic. Cellulosic is such an interesting word, but it's really helpful for me because, malt almost just has this like grain-like character. This, if I was able to give body to these, it has heavy body. It's like I can feel the cellulosic, something is thick in this, and it's toasty. It's kind of this this strong, full toastiness, and it's connected closely with basmati rice for me, that kind of grain-like character. Smoke, again, malt is classic in malt beverages, malted ice cream, malted beer, malt. Malt oatmeal. There was grape nuts. Grape nuts was a cereal that was very malty. Crush it and smell it. Roasted coffee. Toasty and sulfury. Now I grew up on a farm and there were skunks. And this is skunky, but it's that sulfury smell to me. And this is what happens in those that roasting process. Like we smell so many things all together, but if we just isolate that character of roasted coffee, this could move back to that kind of fermenty coffee pulp smell at the later stage when it's roasting. This roasted coffee has this sulfury, toasty, darker smell. And for me, it's also very skunky if I use skunky as an adjective. But it's full and it's rich and it has this volume to it. And that is part of coffee, just as a strong smell. A lot of people love the smell of coffee, but they don't like the taste, and it's part of that voluptuousness. That's the word they use on these posters. Finally, pipe tobacco. Pipe tobacco, I love it. It's toasty, it's sweet. It has kind of this, the one that reminds me of it very much is walnut. It's almost like this fruity, vegetal, pipe tobacco can be sweet and smoky and roasty, connecting with the malt again. So these 18, again, we pulled them off of the dry distillation and the aromatic taints. And this was part 2. Part 1 on the Lait du Café was our sugar browning and enzymatic. Now, again, we just want to go over these and calibrate our language so that we're connected with other coffee professionals. We are engaging in similar language. So when I say something is winey like coffee pulp, that's probably preferable over winey like a red wine or a Pinot Noir, or, you know, some of these different adjectives that people can use, whiskey or bourbon barrel. While those are not wrong, they're just not calibrated to this original 36 Art of Aroma Perception in Coffee and our original standard for the SCAA flavor wheel. Once we learn the basics, these are like our musical scales. Once we learn these, we can move ahead and expand outward. But we always want to come back to that centering point as an industry. I specifically love coffees that display the dry distillation in strength. And those will be our bold coffees, our fully roasted, dark roasted, the espresso shots that you're drinking, kind of the campfire coffee or the coffee you want in the winter to warm you up, you know, the spicy, resinous, pyrolytic. And it will have characteristics of the earthy or fermented or phenolic. Hopefully the aromatic taints are in low volume, but you just get that rich spice boldness on top. So don't fear a good dark roast, and don't fear kind of that, you know, dry distillation. You gotta move further in the roast process. And some coffees, if they're aged, maybe you want to roast them a little darker because they're not going to display all of those original fruits and acids and sweetness that they had when they were fresh. That's okay. Every coffee has a home, as my good friend Saifa likes to say. Also, if the coffee is of lower quality or if the growing conditions weren't great that year, let's find a way to blend it, to find what can we emphasize in this. Coffee is to be a bold drink, it's to come out. So there may be a lot of people who are desiring that bold, dry distillation, spicy, resinous, pyrolytic kind of aspect to it. All right, continue your study, and finally, I'll leave you with this. If you are, you know, if you're just trying to characterize these, maybe you're studying at home, maybe you have or don't have a Lait du Café, something that we use, you can see my coffee stain on it, when I was in class, was just a list of those 36, and we characterized them by color. So 9 of each of those colors. And just kind of connecting them visually and with colors. And we put the families and categories, we put the names, we put the numbers, and then I just tried to memorize them. I tried to remember which ones I made a check mark were easy, or I felt like I had nailed them. Then I knew which ones I had to spend more time practicing. The other way you can do that is kind of a simple chart with 9 and 4, 9 columns, 4 rows or 8 rows, and you can label them by number and category, and you can even put in some notes like this one reminds me of when I was a boy, and this happened on the farm, or this reminds me of when I visited so-and-so and we ate this. All of these aspects with our Lait du Café, with aromas and fragrances, they're connected with some sensory olfactory memory. So keep building your memory, keep practicing and coming back to those memories. And if you have any questions, as always, reach out. I'm happy to help. All right, see you next time.